coffee in a gas station cup, sun coming up in my dash, mud on these worn out boots, pay stuff folded in the cash, dad's old cap on my seat, smells like dust and gas.
So picture a man who was, just completely loyal. I mean, a man who literally said yes to absolutely everything.
Right.
A man who was formed to obey since childhood and eventually trusted with the highest government responsibilities within this massive global religious institution.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing you really have to understand is he wasn't some outsider. He wasn't a rebel. He wasn't someone who, just failed to fit in or struggled with the rules.
No, not at all. He was the ideal member.
Exactly. He was
Okay.
obedient, available, highly trained, immensely trusted, and just incredibly useful to them.
Yeah.
And yet, when he finally began to ask questions, the system didn't answer him. Like, it didn't dialogue with him at all. It treated his well-formed conscience as a disease that needed to be cured.
It's just a profound paradox, really. And it's precisely why this story is so critical for us to unpack today.
Right.
Because we're looking at a system that functions perfectly, right up until the exact moment it encounters the very thing it claims to cultivate, which is a genuine working conscience.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder.
It really begs the question of what an institution actually values when push comes to shove.
It really does. So today we are taking you on a very specific mission in this deep dive. We have this first-person testimony, a really meticulously detailed document written by a former numerary, and we'll define what that is in a second, of Opus Dei. He writes under the pseudonym Not Worth It. But I want to make our goal today crystal clear for you, the listener. Our aim here is not to attack individual believers.
Absolutely not.
We are not here to mock anyone's faith or, single out personal religious practices. Not at all.
No, our focus today is entirely structural and psychological. We are really examining what happens when faith, obedience, personal conscience, and just immense institutional power become completely fused in a high-control environment.
Right.
It's all about the mechanics of control.
Yeah, so keep this central thesis in mind as you listen to this deep dive. This testimony isn't just the story of one man leaving Opus Dei.
No, it's so much bigger than that.
It is. It's a masterclass, a tragic one, really, in how a religious institution can methodically train a person to surrender their judgment, their identity, their career, their emotions, and their conscience.
And then how that exact same institution pathologizes them the moment that conscience finally wakes up.
Yes, exactly.
It's really a psychological case study in institutional capture. And what makes this particular document so uniquely valuable is the narrator's position.
Right, because he was inside.
Exactly. He wasn't on the fringes. He wasn't just a casual attendee. He was deep, deep in the engine room of the organization.
But to understand how he got to that high level of leadership, we really have to go back to the very beginning, don't we?
We do. We have to look at how absolute obedience is manufactured from the ground up.
So let's start with his background. The narrator is from Spain, and he grows up totally immersed in an Opus Dei environment.
Right, the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, he goes to their schools, he attends their youth clubs, he has family members who are already in the organization. He actually describes his childhood self as the, quote, typical club kid.
Which means what exactly in that context?
Basically, he was nice, well-integrated, eager to please, the kind of kid who just wants to do the right thing and make the adults happy.
Right, a totally normal kid.
Exactly. And then, before he even turns 14 years old, his club director, who is an adult numerary, pulls him aside.
Okay, let's pause there. Before we get into what the director actually says to him, maybe we should explain to the listener what a numerary is.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Can you break that down?
Absolutely. So within Opus Dei, a numerary is a celibate member who commits to living in the organization's centers.
Okay.
They hand over their entire professional income to the institution, and they pledge absolute, unquestioning obedience to the directors.
Wow. All of their income.
Every cent. It is a total, all-encompassing life commitment. I mean, it dictates where you live, who you live with, what you do with your money, and fundamentally just how you make any life choices at all.
Okay, so keep that extreme level of commitment in mind, right? This adult director takes this 13-year-old kid aside and just plants the idea that this boy has a lifelong vocation to be a numerary himself.
A lifelong, irreversible calling from God, presented to a middle schooler.
It's wild. And, I was reading this part of the testimony expecting to see months or even years of deep philosophical grooming, but the speed of it is just staggering.
That really is fast.
He says he has 2 conversations with this adult director. Literally 2 conversations, maybe an hour each.
Wow.
And after that, this 13-year-old boy goes to pray, comes back and says, decided, I give my life to God from now on. I'm going to be a numerary.
At 13.
At 13. He wasn't even legally old enough to write the formal letter asking to join as an aspirant. He actually had to wait 7 months just to reach the minimum age of 14 to put his request in writing.
That is just, it's so revealing.
The narrator himself actually asks you, the reader, directly in the text, can you make lifelong decisions at that age?
It's a rhetorical question, of course,
Right.
because developmentally and neurologically, the answer is just a resounding no.
Obviously.
If we look at this through the lens of early identity formation, it is textbook institutional capture of adolescence. Think about what is actually happening in a human brain at 13 or 14.
It's a lot of chaos, usually.
Exactly. Your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for long-term planning, impulse control, and, gaming out future consequences, that part is entirely under construction.
Right.
It won't be fully developed until your mid-20s.
So you literally lack the biological hardware to understand what the concept of forever even means.
Precisely. You physically cannot process it. But what is highly active in a young teenager's brain is the limbic system.
Okay, what does that do?
It means you are intensely seeking tribal belonging, identity, and the approval of authority figures. You want to be special.
Oh yeah, every teenager wants to feel special.
Right. So when an adult authority figure, someone you really respect, someone who literally represents God in your community, looks at you and says, God has a special plan for you to join the elite ranks, that is an incredible dopamine hit for a child.
Think about it legally and practically.
Yeah.
Think about your own kids, or think about yourself at 14.
It's terrifying.
At 14, society universally recognizes your complete lack of capacity for permanent decisions.
Yeah.
You cannot sign a legally binding contract for a cell phone.
Right.
You cannot drive a car. You can't even get a tattoo because we all recognize you might regret putting ink on your arm in 5 years.
Exactly.
Yet, in this highly controlled spiritual environment, he is encouraged and celebrated for surrendering the entire trajectory of his life, his future sexuality, his family planning, and his whole career path.
And I really want to point out that 7-month waiting period you mentioned.
Yeah, because he was too young to write the letter.
Right. That wait is a brilliant, if perhaps unintentional, psychological tactic. Well, you might think that making him wait would give him time to, cool off and change his mind.
Yeah, like a cooling off period for a big purchase.
Exactly. But in a high control system, it does the exact opposite. By forcing him to wait to write the letter, they transform his commitment from this impulsive childhood choice into a deep, agonizingly desired goal.
Oh, wow. It creates artificial scarcity.
Yes.
Like a luxury brand making you sit on a wait list so you want the bag even more.
That is a perfect way to look at it. It cements the identity. Because during those 7 months, he isn't reevaluating his choice. He is actively practicing being, quote, the boy waiting to give his life to God.
Wow.
His whole internal narrative shifts. And from that exact moment, his personal desires, just the normal things a teenager wants to do, begin to be systematically replaced by institutional availability.
Just totally swapping out his own personality for the group's needs.
Right. The psychological mechanism here is that obedience is framed, fundamentally, as the sole path to happiness.
Okay, so if you obey, you're happy.
Yes. If you obey the director, you are perfectly aligned with God's will. Therefore, if you are unhappy or restless, well, you must not be obeying perfectly enough.
So it sets up this totally closed-loop system of control that governs the next 2 decades of his life.
Exactly.
Like, if you feel bad, it's your fault for not surrendering enough. The institution is never wrong.
Never. And what's crucial for the listener to understand here is how this rewires a young person. The institution doesn't present this early recruitment as a loss of freedom.
Right. They wouldn't say, come be a slave.
Right. They present it as the ultimate freedom, the freedom to do exactly what God wants. So the child genuinely believes they are choosing this, completely unaware that the menu of options was curated by the institution before they even sat down at the table.
Man, that's so bleak.
Yeah.
So how does that childhood commitment actually play out as he grows into a young adult?
It turns into a reflex.
Yeah, the word yes just becomes completely automatic, stripped of any real critical thought.
Ugh.
Let me walk you through his early 20s in the testimony, because the whiplash is just intense. Go for it.
By the time he is 1919, he is named the director of a halting place.
And for context, a halting place is basically an Opus Dei center for young people.
Right.
So he is effectively put in charge of recruiting and managing other teenagers and young adults while he is barely out of high school himself.
And this is where we really start to see the erasure of his individual self taking a tangible toll. He's at university, and he actually decides to study 2 degrees at once, which shows you how driven and capable he really is. But by his 3rd year, he drops the 2nd degree.
And why does he do that?
Because, as he puts it, there was simply no time for his things. He had to spend all his afternoons and weekends with people from the work running this center.
The real tragedy there is how he frames it.
Yeah.
He doesn't say he was forced to drop his degree. He says he did it gladly.
Right, he thought it was his own idea.
He writes, I had been formed for that. I thought that was God's plan for me, and that my happiness depended solely on fulfilling it. This is that illusion of consent we were talking about earlier. Right. And he is heavily praised for this sacrifice.
Yeah.
He is publicly lauded by a regional leader in front of all his peers as in, quote, all-round numerary, ready for anything.
Ready for anything.
That phrase, ready for anything, it basically becomes his entire personality.
Yeah.
But the reward for being ready for anything is just a staggering level of geographical and professional instability.
Yeah, let's look at the timeline he provides in the text because it perfectly illustrates how yes went from a conscious choice to just an involuntary reflex.
Okay, lay it out.
So he graduates from university. In June, the directors tell him to live in City A, work in the regional delegation, and be the director of a center in City B.
Which already sounds like 3 full-time jobs for a 21-year-old.
Exactly. Then, by July, literally 1 month later, they tell him to move his residence entirely to City C.
Oh my God.
Then, in October of that exact same year, they tell him he's no longer the director of the center in City B, but now he's the director of a completely different center while still working in the delegation.
June, July, October. 3 massive life upheaval directives in the span of 5 months.
It's meant to keep you off balance.
And listener, think about moving apartments in your early 20s. Think about starting a new job, learning a new city, trying to build a routine. It's exhausting.
Truly.
He does it 3 times in 5 months at 21 years old, and he never complains. Because, as he says, in everything that came from the directors, I saw the will of God.
This brings up a critical conceptual distinction that I really want to emphasize here for you. It's the difference between healthy obedience and toxic obedience.
Okay, yeah, break that down.
In a healthy spiritual vocation, or honestly even a healthy corporate environment, obedience serves the conscience.
Give me an example of what that looks like in practice.
Sure. Let's say you work for a company whose mission you really believe in. You follow your manager's rules, you do the projects you're assigned, even the boring ones, right?
Yeah.
Because you believe in the shared goal.
Makes sense.
But your conscience remains the ultimate arbiter sitting above your obedience. If your manager asks you to do something unethical like, I don't know, falsify financial records, your conscience steps in and overrides your obedience, you say no.
Right, because the conscience is the boss.
Exactly. The conscience is the boss. But in a high control system, obedience replaces the conscience.
Wow.
The institution actively trains you to believe that the highest moral expression of your conscience is simply to obey the director.
So you just outsource it entirely.
You outsource your moral and practical judgment completely. You are taught that your own intuition is flawed and selfish, and the director's voice is literally the voice of God.
I kept thinking of it like a muscle while reading his testimony.
That's right, yeah.
If you go to the gym every single day for 10 years, and you only ever exercise your obedience muscle, you get really, really good at saying yes. But if you completely ignore the critical thinking muscle or the personal preference muscle, they atrophy, they waste away. So what happens when you are finally faced with a heavy moral weight that you need to lift using your own judgment?
You can't do it.
Exactly. You can't. The muscle is gone. You just reflexively say yes because it's the only movement you know how to make.
That is a perfect analogy, and we see the ultimate expression of this atrophied personal will when he is asked to go to the Roman college in Italy.
Oh, this part, yes.
So this is the International Seminary and Formation Center for Opus Dei. But pay close attention to how the institution frames this move to him.
It's so manipulative.
It really is. They tell him that going to Rome doesn't mean he will be ordained as a priest, but that he must remain, quote, available to be ordained.
This part of the testimony gave me chills. He explains the internal theological logic they use. The institution claims that for an ordination to happen, 3 wills must perfectly align. God's will, the Father's will, meaning the prelate, the head of Opus Dei, and the individual's will.
Sounds fair on paper, right? Three distinct entities agreeing.
Yeah, it sounds super reasonable. But the narrator points out the grim reality of how that actually functions in practice.
Right.
Because in reality, the institution decides what God's will is. The institution decides what the Father's will is. And they only ever ask for your opinion after they have already decided what they want to do with you.
So the pressure is immense.
Exactly. So if you say no, you aren't just disagreeing with management. You are actively thwarting the will of God.
It is entirely coercive. It's the illusion of consent masquerading as free will. They keep him in a state of perpetual suspended animation.
Just waiting to be told who he is.
Right. He must be perfectly willing to be a priest if they need him to be, and perfectly willing to remain a layman if they decide he isn't needed. The psychological toll of that is immense.
Well, I can't even imagine.
He has completely surrendered the authorship of his own life story. He is basically a character in a novel waiting to see what the author writes for him next.
Which brings us to the glaring contradiction of his professional life. You know, when you research Opus Dei, their main public relations claim, their whole theological brand, really is about lay people sanctifying ordinary work in the middle of the world.
Right, that's their whole pitch.
And the idea is beautiful on the surface. You don't need to be a monk in a monastery to be holy. You can be a holy banker, a holy doctor, a holy teacher, right there in the secular world.
That is absolutely the official narrative. It's the core of their recruitment. But let's look at the lived reality of this narrator, who, again, is an ideal elite member.
Okay, so he studied education at university specifically because he passionately wanted to be a teacher. He wanted to be in the classroom with students. But for the first 10 years after he graduated, he never taught a single class.
Not one.
He worked exclusively in internal institutional roles. He worked in regional delegations. He directed internal centers. He managed the organization's administration.
He meets a very bitter irony in the text here, actually. He observes that in the Opus Dei schools in his region, many of the numeraries who were actually teaching in the classrooms didn't even have degrees in education.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they didn't actually care about pedagogy or teaching. They were placed in the schools purely to have access to the students in order to recruit the next generation of numeraries.
So let me get this straight.
Ah.
The people who didn't want to teach were teaching so they could recruit.
Yeah.
And he, who held an education degree and desperately wanted to teach, was trapped in a back office doing bureaucratic paperwork.
It's a complete inversion of their public ethos.
It really is. It made me think of a corporate bait and switch.
How so?
Imagine you have a deep passion for architecture. You get your degree, you are brilliant at it, and you get hired by a prestigious architectural firm. You are thrilled to design buildings.
Sounds great.
But on your first day, they put you in human resources, and your only job is to recruit other architects to join the firm.
Ah, I see.
You do this for 10 years. You spend a decade hiring architects, managing architects, doing the payroll for architects, and you never once get to draw a blueprint yourself.
And how long before that architect loses their sense of self?
Exactly.
If we connect this to the broader psychological picture, your professional identity is perpetually delayed. You are told by your spiritual directors that your secular work is your path to God, but the institution demands so much internal maintenance and governance that your secular work ceases to exist.
It just vanishes.
You aren't a teacher in the middle of the world. You are an institutional functionary. He notes that it took 10 years and moving to an entirely different country for him to finally be allowed to teach.
And even then, it was barely anything, right?
Right. Even then, it was only part-time for a few hours a week because his governance duties took priority.
But the bureaucratic machinery wasn't done with him yet. It was about to pull him into the absolute nerve center of the organization.
Right.
Because eventually, he ends up at Villa Tavere.
Right.
Now, for the listener who isn't familiar, what is Villa Tavere?
So, Villa Tavere is the international headquarters of Opus Dei, located in Rome. It is effectively the Vatican within the Vatican for this organization.
It's the big leagues.
It really is. It is where the prelate lives, where the central councils meet, and where the global directives are issued.
Now, remember his trained reflex to just say yes to everything. He's at the Roman college, studying, and he can read the tea leaves. He knows he has the exact profile the leadership wants for a headquarters bureaucrat.
He's smart, he's young.
He's young, he's Spanish, he has deep experience in regional governance, and above all, his reputation is that he is ready for anything.
Yep, that cursed phrase again.
So for the first time in his life, he tries to exert a tiny, tiny bit of autonomy. He actively asks his directors not to be transferred to Villa Taveri. He sees it coming, and he begs them to spare him.
And what happens? A month later, he is appointed as an official at Villa Taveri anyway.
Just totally ignored. His request meant absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all. But the crucial detail is how he is informed. He isn't asked. There is no dialogue, no negotiation. He's simply told that the father, the prelate, has appointed him. The narrator writes, quote, "Without a road, how would you feel about, would you mind?" He asks the reader, "Is that how decisions are made in a normal family?"
It just completely shatters the rhetoric of the organization. They use all this beautiful familial language saying they have bonds stronger than blood, that they are a loving family spending themselves for each other.
But it's just words.
Exactly. The administrative reality he experiences is ruthless, cold, and entirely unilateral. Yet, because of his lifetime of training, he packs his bags and goes to Rome with a smile, convincing his atrophied conscience that this must be God's perfect plan.
And he spends 4 years there, working specifically in St. Michael's, which is the internal department that manages the numeraries globally.
Okay, so he's seeing everything.
Everything. I cannot stress enough how vital this context is for understanding his later crisis. The author of this testimony is not a disgruntled former member who misunderstood the rules from the outside.
He's not guessing.
He is not someone who lacked access to information. He was literally processing the paperwork that governed the lives of numeraries around the world. He was trusted with the highest levels of professional secrecy. He knows the internal policies backward and forward.
He knows how the sausage is made globally.
Exactly.
And after 4 years of doing that in Rome, he volunteers to go to a very distant country to help set up the organization's presence there. And the lengths he goes to are astounding.
Tell me about it.
He spends 2 agonizing years learning a deeply complex new language. He says they started a language class with 20 people, and it was so difficult that only 3 people finished.
Wow.
He was one of them. He wanted to integrate 100%. He wanted to be just another citizen of this new country and finally do that ordinary work.
But again, the institution overrides his personal desire. As soon as he finishes the language course, they tap him for the highest lay governance position in that entire region.
Of course they do.
He is named the Defender of the Regional Commission.
I was actually confused by that title initially. What does the Defender actually do in this power structure?
In their regional governing structure, the Defender is essentially the second in command for the men's branch in a given territory, right underneath the regional vicar, who is always a priest.
Okay.
But the functional power of the Defender is immense. The rule requires that the Defender must read, alongside the vicar, all incoming and outgoing reports, all internal letters, all consultations for the entire region.
So every private report about a member's struggles, every financial directive, every strategic plan, he sees it all.
Every single piece of paper.
He is handed the keys to the control room.
Precisely. And this is where the entire psychological edifice he has built over 20 years begins to crack.
Because he can finally see the whole picture.
Yes. Because when the ultimate true believer, a man with a highly refined moral compass, is finally given total visibility into the machinery of power, he cannot unsee how it actually operates.
Which brings us to the actual crisis. And this is perhaps the most important distinction we need to make today. When people leave high-control religious groups, how does the institution usually frame their departure?
Oh, almost universally, the institution frames the departure as a personal failing of the individual.
Right.
They will say the person lost their faith, or they had a weakness of the flesh, or they succumbed to pride, or they just wanted an easier, secular life.
Just blaming the victim, basically.
Or, very commonly, they will claim the person suffered a sudden psychological breakdown. The institution protects its own perfection by placing all the blame on the individual's flaws.
But his crisis wasn't any of those things. That's what makes this testimony so incredibly powerful. He states explicitly that in nearly 20 years, he never had the slightest doubt about his vocation.
Not once.
He didn't want to leave. He wasn't looking for a loophole. He wanted to be a better member of Opus Dei. The crisis didn't happen because his conscience failed. The crisis happened because his conscience was working exactly as it should.
Think about his education. He had spent decades being educated in moral theology, philosophy, and virtue. His conscience was exquisitely well formed by the institution's own teachings.
Right, they trained him to know right from wrong.
Exactly. And as Defender, reading all those internal reports, seeing how people were managed, he suddenly saw a massive, unbridgeable gap between what the work claimed to be a loving family, and the reality of how people were actually treated.
He says he saw a profound lack of charity. He saw people being used as chess pieces, discarded when they were no longer useful, or manipulated to serve the institution's goals.
And initially, you can see his programming kick in to protect him from this horrible truth.
Oh yeah, the cognitive dissonance.
His internal monologue says, "The institution is perfect, therefore your perception must be wrong." He tries to silence his own mind. He tells himself to be humble, that he's young, that the senior directors must know better. He represses his deep moral disgust for 6 solid months.
But a healthy conscience can only be suppressed for so long when confronted with systemic hypocrisy, right? Especially when your own signature is required to perpetuate it.
Yes, that's the breaking point.
Finally, he just can't do it. He cannot sign his name to the governance documents anymore. He genuinely feels that God will hold him morally accountable for approving actions and policies that he knows are uncharitable and wrong.
So what does a loyal son do in a family?
He goes to the father.
Exactly.
He writes a letter to the prelate in Rome. He uses a completely transparent internal channel. He doesn't go to the press. He doesn't leak documents on the internet.
No, he follows the rules.
He writes a deeply vulnerable letter, given to his regional vicar to read first out of respect for the chain of command, and asks Rome for help. He asks for dialogue. He asks for an explanation of these structural flaws.
And what kind of pastoral response does he get from the heart of the spiritual family?
Absolute silence. Crickets. Rome ignores it completely.
It's just heartbreaking. He's agonizing over his eternal soul, and they don't even acknowledge receipt of the letter.
So after waiting, he writes a second, much harsher letter.
Mm-hmm.
He realizes polite inquiries won't work anymore. He formally declares himself in a crisis of conscience.
He draws a line.
He explicitly asks to be relieved of his governance posts because he cannot, in good conscience, continue to sign the documents. He is begging for a conversation about structural truth and charity.
And surely the second letter, declaring a crisis of conscience from a top regional leader, gets a phone call.
Right.
A priest calling to say, "Brother, what's going on? Let's pray together."
You would think.
No. They don't send a letter. They don't call to comfort him. They send a fax.
A fax.
The bureaucratic fax to the regional vicar demanding that the narrator get on the first available flight to Rome, quote, today or tomorrow.
Unbelievable.
And the narrator later discovers, through an accidental leak, the exact phrasing Rome used internally when summoning him. It is one of the most chilling lines in the entire testimony.
What was it?
The directors in Rome said, "Let him come and we'll see if he returns."
We'll see if he returns.
Wow. That single sentence strips away every layer of the familial rhetoric. It is the language of a corporate emergency extraction or a political purge. They aren't inviting a brother home to heal him. They are isolating a whistleblower to contain a threat.
It's purely threat management. He is a liability because he knows too much and he suddenly cares about ethics.
Precisely. In institutional dynamics, when a high-ranking insider suddenly points out a structural flaw, the institution's survival instinct kicks in.
Right.
The first step is always isolation. You remove the individual from their local context, from anyone who might agree with them or be influenced by their doubts, and you bring them to the center of power where you control the environment completely.
So he obeys because that's what he does. He packs his bags and goes to the airport. And this leads us to the flight to Rome. Now, listener, this is where the psychological arc of this story reaches its most heartbreaking and ultimately triumphant turning point.
It really is the turning point.
He's on this long intercontinental flight. He's exhausted, he's confused, he's terrified about what awaits him in Rome. He puts on an airplane sleep mask to block out the cabin light. And underneath that mask, in the dark, he begins to cry.
And if you're listening, you might think, well, of course he's crying. He's under immense stress. His whole life is falling apart.
Yeah, it's a completely normal reaction.
But the narrator stops his own story right there to emphasize to the reader how monumental those tears were. He says it was the first time he had cried in 20 years, 2 full decades.
Think about what happens in 20 years of a normal human life. The breadth of human experience.
Exactly.
During those 20 years, he had undergone 2 major surgeries. He had seen close friends die. He had seen family members die. His siblings had gotten married. He had lived through grief, joy, physical pain, and profound life transitions. And through all of it, for 20 years, he never shed a single tear.
And we need to explain why he didn't cry. It wasn't because he was naturally stoic.
Right.
It was because of a specific spiritual concept he had been taught called the supernatural outlook.
Well, what does that mean?
He had been systematically trained to believe that a truly spiritual person sees everything through God's eyes and therefore has the supernatural fortitude to bear absolutely anything without breaking.
Oh, wow.
In this framework, natural human emotions, sadness, pain, grief, are viewed as irrelevant or even spiritually dangerous. They are signs of weakness. The only thing that matters is doing the duty of the present moment.
He writes, quote, "Read the book, put on the cellus, do the work." Now, for the listener who has no idea what a cellus is, can you explain that? Because it really highlights the physical extreme of this emotional suppression.
Yes. A cilice is a physical instrument of corporal mortification. In Opus Dei, it is typically a spiked metal chain worn tightly around the upper thigh for a couple of hours a day to induce mild pain.
That sounds intense.
The theological idea is to unite one's physical discomfort with the suffering of Christ. But psychologically, when you combine physical pain induction with a mandate to suppress all emotional distress, you are training the mind to dissociate from the body's natural warning signals.
You are actively killing your own natural responses. He writes this devastating line in the testimony. "I had exchanged my heart for perfect compliance with the rules."
Yeah, it's just so sad.
He describes his heart as having rusted, a rusted heart. The system had inadvertently trained him to suppress all natural human emotional responses in the name of spiritual toughness.
It's a psychological deep freeze. When you are taught from the age of 14 that your feelings are an obstacle to God's will, you learn to detach from them completely.
You just shut down.
You survive the whiplash, the moving across the country, the delayed career by becoming completely numb.
I kept thinking of like being caught in an avalanche. You get buried in the snow, and eventually you stop feeling the cold because your nerve endings are dead.
Yeah.
You are frozen solid. But those tears on the airplane, that is the thaw. And thawing out after a 20-year deep freeze is agonizing. If you've ever had frostbite and the blood starts rushing back to your hands, the pain is excruciating.
Yeah, it burns.
But the pain of the thaw, the stinging, the burning, that is the biological proof that the tissue isn't dead, it's still alive. His humanity was returning to him on that flight.
And we see the profound interpersonal cost of that deep freeze later on. He mentions in the text that after he left, when he finally saw his mother, he hugged her in a way he never had before.
Oh, this part.
And she was shocked. She actually said to him, "You've never given me a hug like that in your life."
Which is just deeply tragic. Why would a mother accept 20 years of emotional coldness from her own son?
Because the institution frames that detachment as holy. A mother in that environment is taught that her son's aloofness is a sign of his deep spiritual commitment. He is dead to the worldly affections, alive only to God.
So she just accepts it.
She accepted a rusted heart because she was told it was a holy heart. But with that hug, his emotional capacity was finally rebooting. But before he could fully reclaim his life, he had to survive the headquarters.
Yes. He lands in Rome. He enters the lion's den. He arrives expecting a deep, rigorous, theological, and administrative dialogue about the grave issues of charity and governance he raised in his letters.
Right, he thinks they're going to talk it out.
Instead, he is met with a highly coordinated, multi-step strategy to neutralize him.
We can break the institution's playbook down into 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is distraction.
How so?
They don't put him in a meeting room to discuss his letters. They greet him and say, "Did you bring your football boots? Go play on the new artificial grass pitch."
What?
They tell him to take walks, look at the Toronto, the sunset, get some fresh air for the jet lag.
It's wildly infantilizing. Think about this. He is a senior regional director. He has flown across the world to discuss a crisis of conscience that is tearing him apart, and they're patting him on the head and telling him to go look at the pretty sunset.
It's completely dismissive.
After 3 days of this bizarre holiday camp treatment, he finally drops the polite hints and asks a senior director directly, "Are we going to talk about the issues I wrote about in my letters?"
And this direct question triggers phase 2, dismissal.
Okay.
The director tells him point blank, "No, we're not going to talk about what you wrote in those letters."
Just a flat, unapologetic refusal.
Because engaging with his arguments would mean acknowledging them as valid points of discussion. It might require admitting the institution is flawed, that the governance is uncharitable.
No, they can't do that.
A high-control group cannot tolerate structural critique. It threatens the entire premise of their divine perfection. So if you can't invalidate the critique with logic, you must invalidate the person making it. which leads directly to phase 3, pathologization.
This is where the story gets incredibly dark. He tries to bring up the issues again, and the director says to him, and the narrator highlights this textually, "You're obsessed." The director tells him he thinks too much, he's stubborn, he's just tired, and he needs a medical checkup. And he doesn't send him to an independent hospital in Rome.
No, of course not.
He sends him to a work doctor, a priest who is an official of the council and acts as an internal physician for the headquarters.
We really need to analyze the weaponization of medical authority happening here.
Please do.
The doctor-priest doesn't conduct a genuine psychiatric evaluation. He asks leading questions. Are you tired? Do you turn things over in your mind a lot?
It sounds like a trap.
It is. The narrator quickly realizes the director has already briefed the doctor with a predetermined diagnosis. When the narrator says, the director says, "I'm obsessed," the doctor replies, "Well, then this is something we have to treat."
Unbelievable.
Based purely on the director's annoyance with his administrative questions, the doctor prescribes him heavy pills to take morning and night.
And he takes them. He takes them blindly. You read it and want to scream at the page, "Don't take the pills."
Right.
But the programming of a lifetime kicks in. He repeats the internal mantra he was taught at 14. He who obeys is never wrong.
It is institutional gaslighting in its absolute purest form.
It really is.
Gaslighting is making someone question their own sanity and reality. He saw a structural failure in the organization. The organization tells him, the structure is perfect, therefore your brain must be broken, you are mentally ill, take these pills.
Listener, imagine you're driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour, and you realize the brakes on your car are completely failing. You manage to pull into a mechanic shop, terrified, and you say, "The brakes are broken. The car is unsafe. We need to fix the brakes."
Right.
And the mechanic looks at the car, doesn't even check the brake pads, looks back at you and says, "The car is flawless." You, however, seem very anxious about the brakes. I'm prescribing you anti-anxiety medication so you stop worrying about it.
It's a great analogy because it solves the mechanic's problem. You stop complaining, but it leaves you driving a deadly vehicle. And the pathologization wasn't just medical, it was spiritual, which makes it a dual assault. The director later asks him if he has confessed his sins regarding this crisis.
Sins?
He tells him to go to confession and accuse himself of tampering with his vocation.
That is unbelievable. They are demanding he categorizes his pursuit of truth, his working conscience, as a mortal sin.
Yes.
If he confesses it as a sin, he is spiritually binding himself to never question the institution again. They're trapping him chemically with the pills and spiritually through the sacrament of confession. And they wrap this all up in a straitjacket of care and love.
Right. He describes the whole environment during those 10 days in Rome as intense love bombing.
I was going to say, it sounds like love bombing.
They give him the best seats at meals, they take him on excursions, they invite him to exclusive evening get-togethers with the prelate. It is a highly coordinated manipulation. Medicate the Dissent and overwhelm the subject with manufactured affection so he feels incredibly guilty for ever doubting his beautiful family.
And terrifyingly, the pills start working. He admits in the testimony that he started sleeping through the afternoons. He started to feel nauseous and foggy.
They were sedating him.
He started to genuinely doubt his own mind, thinking, maybe they are right. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I am obsessed. They even send another priest down to his home region, not to investigate his claims about lack of charity, but simply to cheer up the atmosphere and ensure his complaints hadn't infected the rest of the local leadership.
The containment strategy is terrifyingly efficient.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it wasn't foolproof, because eventually they let him get on a plane to go back to his region, and that geographic separation is what saves him.
The long flight back is his salvation. He is away from the love bombing, away from the directors, suspended in the air.
Right.
The chemical fog begins to lift just enough. His conscience, that little light bulb that had been flickering, turns back on. He has this moment of absolute clarity and realizes they've deceived you.
Yeah.
They didn't let him talk. They called him obsessed, and they medicated him to shut him up.
The spell is finally broken. He makes the definitive, internal decision to leave. But it's fascinating. He notes the nonlinear nature of escaping a high-control group.
How so?
Even after making the firm decision to leave, the programming is so deeply ingrained that he continues taking the pills for a few days. He needs an external shock to fully sever the psychological cord.
So he takes a massive risk. He goes to see a priest who is not a member of Opus Dei.
A completely outside perspective.
A normal diocesan priest from the outside world. He sits down, tells this outsider his entire story, and the priest gives him 3 pieces of immediate practical advice.
What were they?
First, stop taking the pills immediately and read the leaflet inside the box. Second, leave the organization. Third, don't let this experience make you lose your faith in God.
The intervention in the outside world is absolutely crucial here. High-control environments rely on maintaining a total monopoly of perspective.
Exactly.
The moment an independent, rational actor looks at the situation, the absurdity and the danger become glaringly obvious. The spell dissolves in the light of normal reality.
So he goes back to his room, and for the first time, he pulls out the little folded informational leaflets inside the pill boxes.
And this is the moment your jaw just drops as a reader.
It's insane.
He reads the indications. The morning pills he was given are indicated for the treatment of severe depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and bulimia nervosa. The nighttime pills are indicated for clinical forms of epilepsy in infants and adults.
He was prescribed heavy psychotropic drugs and anticonvulsants epilepsy medication by a priest doctor who conducted no neurological or psychiatric evaluation.
It's malpractice.
To give anticonvulsants to a healthy brain slows down neural firing. It induces massive brain fog and lethargy. It was chemical restraint used simply to sedate him because he asked difficult administrative questions. The medical and ethical violation is staggering.
It's absolutely horrifying. He flushes the pills, and he begins to plot his escape. And he knows he has to be highly strategic. He doesn't just walk out the front door.
So he knows better than that.
He writes 2 distinct letters to request his official dispensation to leave. One is a standard, formal, polite, bureaucratic request. The other is a brutal, scorched earth letter detailing exactly how they manipulated him, documenting the medical malpractice, the gaslighting, the lack of charity. I asked myself while reading, why write 2 letters? Why not just send the brutal one?
Because he finally understands the institutional mind, and he is using his insider knowledge to protect himself.
That's smart.
He knows that if he only wrote the brutal letter, they would reject his request, demanding he submit a clean letter for their archives to maintain the historical fiction that everyone leaves happily, freely, and on good terms.
Oh, they want the paper trail to look perfect.
Exactly. By giving them the clean letter for the files, but sending the brutal letter directly to the leadership, he creates leverage through fear. He lets them know that he sees exactly what they did and he has documented it.
So they have to let him go.
This ensures they process his exit paperwork as fast as possible to avoid a scandal. He turns their own bureaucracy against them.
He turns down their offers of hush money, which they try to disguise as moving assistance. He wants absolutely 0 financial ties, and then he packs his bags.
The visual of this is incredible.
Think about the visual here, listener. After 20 years of total, unquestioning devotion, a man who held the highest regional offices, a man who gave his entire youth, his career, and his emotional life to this organization. He waits until midnight. He sneaks out of the center in the dark, trying not to make a sound, lugging his bags into a waiting taxi. Like a thief in the night, he says.
The contrast is devastating. Think back to his entry at age 14. He was celebrated, told he was specially chosen by God, elevated with all this spiritual grandeur.
Right.
And his exit, after giving them his best years, is reduced to stealth, fear, and sneaking out the back door in the dead of night just to reclaim his own autonomy.
And the final severing of his legal tie to the institution. It doesn't happen in a grand cathedral. It doesn't happen with a blessing from a priest.
Where does it happen?
Weeks later, after forcing them to respond by threatening to just walk away entirely, he meets an Opus Dei director to receive his verbal dispensation. Where do they meet? At a McDonald's.
The McDonald's.
Over fast food, in the most mundane setting possible, he is told he is no longer in the work.
It is the ultimate demystification of the system. The grand, divine, untouchable facade crumbles into the most mundane, bureaucratic reality imaginable.
Totally.
But psychologically for him, it is an absolute triumph. He survived the institutional capture, the individual conscience reasserted itself, fought through the chemical fog, and overrode the programming. He walked out of that McDonald's into the middle of the world, the real world, for the first time in his adult life.
It is a breathtaking story of psychological survival. It brings us back to our final takeaway. We've spent this entire deep dive exploring the specific mechanics of Opus Dei. But as we said at the very start, this isn't just about one specific religious institution. It is a universal case study in human psychology.
Exactly. The mechanisms of control we've discussed today, early identity capture of adolescence, creating artificial scarcity, the weaponization of obedience to overwrite conscience, isolating dissenters, pathologizing critique, using gaslighting to protect leadership. These are not unique to religious environments.
No, you see them everywhere.
You will see these exact same patterns in cult-like tech startups that demand 80-hour work weeks and frame it as passion.
Right.
You see it in extreme political movements that demand total ideological purity and cast out anyone who asks a nuanced question. You even see it in toxic narcissistic family dynamics.
Recognizing the signs of obedience replacing conscience is a vital life skill for all of us. If an organization, a boss, a leader, or a partner ever tells you that your moral compass is broken simply because it is pointing out their flaws, you need to recognize the trap.
Knowledge of these systems is the absolute best defense against them. A healthy system, whether it's a church, a company, or a relationship, encourages your conscience to grow and respect your autonomy. A toxic system demands you outsource your conscience to them entirely.
Which leaves us with a final lingering thought for you, the listener. We started this hour by picturing a man who said yes to everything, who traded his internal compass for the absolute certainty and protection of an institution.
Yeah.
Imagine yourself in a moment of deep vulnerability. Maybe you're seeking purpose or seeking belonging. If someone came to you and offered you a guaranteed place in the world, total certainty, and a promise of ultimate happiness, but the unspoken price was outsourcing your conscience to them, would you recognize the deep freeze before it took hold? Or would you simply say yes?
Count my losses in the passing pines. If every wrong turn still somehow led me here to you, guess I can't complain when I look back through this back road real with you. First scar on my knuckle from a fight that proved